Abiding. You think I'm kidding. But one of the last points that we covered, or we addressed. You can't cover. Let me say it this way: you can't cover any of the points of abiding. It's impossible to exhaust it. But understanding what it looks like is incredible. But one of the last things that we at least addressed a couple of weeks ago, because last week we got interrupted by my nephew, and so just keep praying for him. He's crazy. But we talked about abiding helps us to walk as Christ. That was one of the final pieces that we discussed. And how many of you want to walk like Jesus? Anybody besides me find out that's easier some days than others? Sometimes I walk way too much like Rod and not enough like God. And I'm like, Lord, help me. But we talked about that abiding helps us to walk like Christ. And so as we spend time with Him, we will look like Him, we will act like Him, and who we surround ourselves with is going to influence us. And we talked about that if bad company does corrupt good morals, then it would stand to reason that good company improves good morals. If I spend time with Him, hopefully I start looking like Him. I've heard it said many times, and I wish it weren't true, but I've seen it play out in my life. If you want to know where you're going, look at the people surrounding you. And so I've decided in my life, I want to look like Jesus. And I screw that up so much. But I'm thankful for His grace. And I'm thankful that even in those moments where I don't get it right, He's always right. And in those moments where I make mistakes, He doesn't flick me off to the side and say, you messed up, you're done. Anybody thankful for second chances? Anybody thankful for 347,000th chances in a day? Jesus help me. And so this morning, I'm not talking abiding per se, but I'm going to jump off of that for a moment, and I want to talk about walking as Christ. And I don't think this is a series, although it could be. You just never know. But, as I started thinking through this and what it means to walk as Christ, I zeroed in on 3 stories in the Gospels that we'll dive into in just a few moments. But I want us to understand something this morning. We have a great opportunity and responsibility to represent Jesus on earth. And I dare say, in a lot of ways, over the years, we as a church, not just here, but the big C across the board, we've not always got that part right. I don't want to represent a denomination. I don't want to represent theological ideals. I want to represent Jesus Christ, the author and the finisher of my faith. I want to walk like Him. 1 John 4:17 says this, by this is love perfected with us, so that we may have confidence for the day of judgment, because as He is, so also are we in this world. Man, that's encouraging, and if I may say it, a little bit alarming. Ruh-roh. But I'm also thankful that He empowers me, because here's the thing. We've got to get it in our understanding and in our spirit that the Lord has not just employed us for kingdom work, He's empowered us for it. Many times we operate and we live as though we've just been employed by God. And He wants us to figure out how to do it. But that's so far from the truth. He's not employed us, He's empowered us. So that we can do what He did as He walked this earth. Years ago, I was in retail management. Who's ever worked in retail? Man, that'll change your life. I don't know if I lost my hair from retail or ministry or a combination of the two. I don't know. But you work in retail, man, you see some interesting stuff. And there was a season that I ended up in retail management. That poor store, they were desperate. That's all I know. And as in a management position, part of my job was hiring people and interviewing and all that stuff. But I realized quickly if I just hired somebody and said, here, do your best, it wasn't going to work out. So I had a responsibility to not just employ them, but I had to empower them to do their job. And that's what God does with us. He doesn't just call you, He equips you. He doesn't just pull you out, He sets you on a pace, on a journey to fulfill His purpose for your life so that we can walk the way He walked. And so how did Jesus walk? What was His motivation? Was His motivation building an earthly kingdom? No. Those around Him thought it was. They were looking for it. Because I've said this before, not everybody that's hanging around Jesus is around Him for the right reasons. But what did He do? What drove Him? And here's what I have found, and here's what I want to zero in on today. Again, there's so many directions I could take this, but the direction I felt the Lord prompting me was to zero in on this. Jesus was moved and driven by love and compassion. And it caused Him to meet people where they were and to help them move forward to a new place of life and freedom. In other words, Jesus never left anybody where He found them unless they chose to stay there. He meets us where we are, and I'm thankful for that. I'm thankful that He meets me where I am. He doesn't expect me to be like Patty. He doesn't expect me to be like Dennis. He doesn't expect me to be like Ryan or like Kim or like Doretha. He meets me where I am. He knows who I am. He knows who He's made me to be, and He'll meet me right where I am and serve as a catalyst to cause me to see the need, the importance, and the value of moving forward and becoming more like He has really created me to be. You see, the world we live in has shaped us into something He never made us to be. And when we spend time, when we abide, when we're in His presence, He helps us to become who He's called us to be. And the way He lived when He walked this earth was in order to help people become who they were called to be. And it's the way that He lives and works with us, and the way I believe He has called and equipped and empowered us to live and to work with others. So what does this look like? Let's dive into the first of the three stories. And I'm going to do my best to go quick. Trust me when I say this is an overview, okay? There is no way in 30 minutes or so I could exhaust this, but I want to get you thinking about a few things. Can I do that this morning? Is that okay? Say okay if you want. I'm still going to do it, but... How does this look? How did He walk? Number one, Jesus ministered to people more than He ministered to needs. We get way too needs driven. Anybody else? You know what I'm saying? Oh, we got this going up. We got to jump in. We got to be Jesus because something's happened. But Jesus was more focused on people than He was on needs. Oh, God, help me to be more people-oriented than needs-driven. What does that look like? What is our story? In Luke chapter 7, remember the story of the widows of Nain and her son? Listen to this. Soon afterward, He went to a town called Nain and His disciples, and a great crowd went with Him. As He drew near to the gate of the town, behold, a man who had died was being carried out, the only son of the mother, and she was a widow, and a considerable crowd from the town was with her. I don't have time to dive into this, but those people were with her because she had a need, but Jesus saw beyond it. Verse 13, and when the Lord saw her, He had compassion on who? On her. When He saw her, He had compassion on her, and He said to her, do not weep. Then He came up and touched the bier, the coffin, and bearer stood still, and He said, young man, I say to you, arise. And the dead man sat up and began to speak, and Jesus gave him to his mother. So before Jesus met the need of this woman, He met the woman. Before He raised the son, He raised the mom. Before He touched the coffin, and spoke to the dead man. He touched the mom and spoke to her. The death of her son was a great need in her life, but before Jesus addressed the need, he addressed the person. Does that mean he doesn't care about the needs in our lives? Absolutely not. He is touched by the feelings of our infirmities. The things that affect us, he cares about those things. But more than the things that affect us, he cares about us. He cares about you. He cares about me. He cares about the person to your left and to your right. He cares about the person across the room. He cares about the neighbor that you're having a hard time getting along with. He cares about the coworker that got the promotion you think you deserve and you're mad about it. That's not in my notes. But I want you to let this settle and sink in your spirit this morning. Jesus is not drawn to needs, he's drawn to people. His first draw is people. Before he raised the son, he ministered to this woman. He touched her before he met her. And he gives him background and backdrop on this story just for a moment. In this culture, the Bible says she was a widow and he was her only son. In this culture, when her husband passed, her son would have taken over as head of the household. And so once he passed, she got nobody. She's alone. And in that culture, she couldn't just suddenly go out and get a job and do things for herself. She was dependent upon her husband or her son. When both of them are gone, she's in a mess. And there's nothing she can do to fix it. She was going to be alone. She was going to be facing life without a helper of any kind. And she's surrounded by people that know the mess that she's in. Oh, I got to be careful how I say this. Because many times we're surrounded when the need is there and alone when the need is gone. Oh, help us get better at that part. Help us improve at that part to where our compassion is not tied to the moment of need, but our compassion is tied to the person. So she's surrounded by all these people and they're weeping with her and and it's okay. It's part of it. We weep with those who weep. We rejoice with those who rejoice. I get it. It's part of it. I understand. But in that moment, she needed more than just empathy. Right? When we're going through stuff, we don't just need somebody to say, hey, I get it. Or, hey, I'm there for you. I appreciate that and I value that. But sometimes I need just a little bit more. Is that selfish? Maybe. But I think it's reality. And so they're walking out of the town. They're heading out to bury the son. And everybody's weeping. And Jesus he just happens to be there. Don't you love it that when you feel lost and hopeless, Jesus just happens to show up? It's almost like he knows what he's doing. It's amazing, isn't it? But let me tell you what happened. Jesus saw the mother more than he saw the death around her. Oh, if we could get that in our spirit. He doesn't see your diagnosis, he sees you. He doesn't see your financial difficulty, he sees you. You're like, does that mean he doesn't care? No, don't misunderstand what I'm saying. He doesn't look at the outward appearance, he looks at the heart. And that's not just in the story of picking David, that's in every part of our lives. He doesn't look at circumstances, he looks at us. How do we walk like Jesus? It's when we see beyond the circumstance, we see beyond the moment, and we see the person. And before he raised the son, he ministered to the mama. He touched the coffin and everything stood still. But before he touched the coffin, you know what he says to mom? Hey, don't cry. Can I just tell you that sounds heartless? You ever thought about it for just a moment? You know, here's mama, her only son is gone and she's going to be alone, and Jesus says, stop crying. What you crying for? Right? I'll give you something to cry. No. Right? Haven't heard that as a kid. Mama said, I'll give you something to cry. No, Mom, I'm fine. Suddenly, I didn't need to cry anymore. That's not what he's saying. That's not what he's saying. He's not condemning her for emotion. He never has, never will, because he gave them to us. I think what he's saying to her is, don't cry as though you have no hope. Don't cry as though the story is over. Because when Jesus is around, the story's never over. Essentially, here's what he says to her. Do not allow circumstances to suck the life out of you, because life itself is standing in front of you. So he spoke to Mama, prepared her, because catch this for just a moment. If Mama's only in death mode, she can't receive her raised son back to life. Sometimes we're like, God, why don't you fix this? Because we ain't ready to handle it fixed, because we're so used to it being broken. That's no fun to hear. But sometimes before he fixes something in our lives, he needs to prepare us on how to handle it in a fixed situation. She was preparing and learning how to deal with a dead son. And if Jesus gives him back alive before she's prepared to deal with him alive again, you know what she's going to do? She's going to kill him. He raised Jairus' daughter. He goes, listen, folks, make sure she eats. Keep her alive. We can become so accustomed to the mess that if he fixes the mess before we're prepared for it to be fixed, does that make sense? I wish I didn't have to talk about that, because it's like, but just fix everything in my life. And Jesus said, I can't do that yet. You ain't ready. I need to work with you first. Hey, Mama, listen, focus. And everybody's like, oh, what's he doing? He walked right past the coffin. Oh, he must not care. No, he cares a lot. He cares a lot. And he addresses the widow. He goes, hey, listen, look at me. Don't weep. It's not over. I'm here. We got this. You've got this. But I need you to be ready, because what I'm about to do, you ain't ready for it right now. And I believe, when he saw she was ready, he goes, okay, by the way, stop. He touches the coffin. I love this story, and I really wish, I kind of wish I'd have just focused on this one story today. It's so fun, so much fun. But death is moving, and life is moving, and everything stops. Death can't go any further when it meets life. They're progressing. There's a processional going on. Here comes Jesus. He touches the coffin. I mean, even if the ones carrying the coffin wanted to keep going, I don't think they could have. Because death can't move when life gets in the way. So boom. And everything stood still until life spoke. He says, get up. He gets up. He goes, here, Mom. Now that you're ready, take your boy back. Because he ministers to people before he ministers to needs. That make sense? And so when we're living in this life, if we are going to walk like Jesus, then we see beyond the needs that people have, and we see the person. It doesn't mean we don't do our best to meet their need and to help them. And it doesn't mean, hey, may the Lord bless you and keep you. We ignore. I don't mean that. I don't mean ignore stuff. But I am cautious and concerned that over the years, the church has become a Band-Aid more than we've become what we need to be. And we fix the need, we fix the moment, and then where's the person? We're like, why aren't we seeing them? Well, we took care of their need. When another need arises, we'll see them again. I know that's harsh, but we got to understand that aside from the needs in people's lives, we need to see the person and minister to them and care for them to prepare them for what God wants to do in their lives. I've had God do stuff in my life I wasn't ready for, and it wasn't very helpful to me. Let's move on, because I just made like 17 of you mad. Number 2, I got to move through this. I got 15 minutes. We're good. Jesus was willing to minister to all. Anybody thankful for that? He sees you. You matter to him. I matter to him. In Mark 1, a leper came to Jesus, beseeching. I should have looked up that word beseeching. That's pretty cool. Basically asking. beseeching him and falling on his knees before him and saying, "If you are willing, you can make me clean." Moved with compassion, Jesus stretched out his hand and touched him and said to him, "I am willing, be cleansed." And immediately the leprosy left him and he was cleansed. I don't know how much you've looked into this culturally, but that's a bad idea to touch a leper. Right? But it didn't matter to Jesus. He saw the person more than he saw the condition. The compassion, listen, the compassion of Christ always brings about the passion of Christ. Every time he's moved with compassion, something happens. But he wasn't moved with compassion toward leprosy. He was moved with compassion toward the one who had leprosy. Let's not refer to him as a leper because that's not true anymore. He whom the Son sets free is free indeed. I don't believe in recovering anything. I believe that once Jesus sets you free, that's the end of the story. It doesn't mean we don't struggle and have issues ongoing, all that stuff. I get all that. But I used to be this until I'm that. I'm not a sinner saved by grace. I'm a son of God walking in grace. And he ministers to all. And so he was moved. What this means is he was moved in the seat of his affection. His insides were moved with compassion toward the man who had leprosy. In other words, you ready? It could be translated his bowels of mercy, his bowels of compassion. I'm not trying to get weird, but I need you to catch this glimpse for just a minute. It's to be moved to such an extent that what causes the movement has to come out. You understand what I'm saying? You ever been driving along and you're like, oh, where's that next rest area? I got to go. You're moved in your compassion. But when he's moved, it literally means that the compassion that moved him has to come out because it would be unhealthy for him to hold it in. Can we get to the place, hear me, and please understand, I'm going to stretch this and extend this as far as I can, and y'all know me well enough by now to expect this kind of stuff. It's time that the church quit being spiritually constipated. It's time we let out the compassion that he's put in us and meet people around us and make a real difference around us. Because we're like, oh, I'm moved, but I don't know what to do with it. What he's placed in you, he wants to bring out of you because people around you need it. And he never let the condition of someone affect his willingness to touch them. He's a leper. Oh, well, bang, touch. I'm willing, be cleansed. The compassion, what he felt inside for this man was more powerful than what he might face outwardly by touching this man. If what I feel toward people can be interrupted by what it might mean if I touch them, then I've missed the concept of walking like Jesus. But I got to get to the place. People are like, well, you know, he eats with sinners, he eats with publicans, he eats with tax collectors, he touches lepers, he does everything we're not supposed to do. I like that. God, help us to get to the place where we're not told by the religious establishment what we can and can't do, but when compassion moves us, we do something to make a difference in somebody's life. And he was willing to minister to all. It's a huge no-no. I mean, basically, in that culture, a leper would had to wear a sign that says, can't touch this. And you would walk, stop. Thank you, Micah. I knew somebody was, oh. I need those Zubaz pants, right? We're going to have fun. I don't, whatever. But he touched the guy. Man. It's like, whoa, what is he doing? I wonder how many of his disciples says, Jesus, you're not supposed to do that. Yeah, my bad. I wonder. And we're moved with compassion. We can't hold it in. People need what moves you. We okay? We good? Can I give you one more? I'm probably going to keep going with this, and next week it looks like. Not this particular one, but now I'm stuck in this whole idea of what it means to walk like Jesus, because there's a whole lot to this. How many of you have read the Gospels? How many of you been messed up when you've read the Gospels? Like, whoa, that's interesting. Jesus did what? And how many of you have ever found out when you read the Gospels, he ministered to people where they were and it didn't base it on what he was told he was supposed to do? The last one in that compassion and walking like Jesus. And number 3, Jesus saw value in everyone. Luke 19, he entered Jericho as he's passing through, and behold, there was a man named Zacchaeus. He was a chief tax collector, and he was rich. And he was seeking to see who Jesus was, but on account of the crowd, he could not because he was small in stature. In other words, he was maybe at best 5 subway footlongs. Verse 4, so he ran on ahead and climbed up into a sycamore tree to see him, for he was about to pass that way. And when Jesus came to the place, he looked up and he said to him, Zacchaeus, hurry and come down, for I must stay at your house today. So he hurried and came down and received him joyfully. And when they saw it, they all grumbled. He has gone in to be a guest of a man who was a sinner. How dare him do that? How dare the Son of God meet with sinners? Ugh. Jesus, help me on that one. Verse 8, Zacchaeus stood and said to the Lord, behold, Lord, the half of my goods I give to the poor, and if I have defrauded anyone of anything, I restore it fourfold. Jesus said to him, today salvation has come to this house, since he also is a son of Abraham. For the Son of Man came to what? To seek and to save the lost. So Jesus is on his way. Zacchaeus is like, oh, where is he? Can't see him. But I remember studying this one time, and the Lord spoke to me. He goes, never allow the size of the crowd to be so big that you don't position yourself to see him. Don't let the size of what is around you make you feel small. So he's like, I know what I need to do. He went and he climbed a tree. Imagine if Jesus changed direction. Rats. He's out on a limb for no reason. But he... So Jesus is passing by. Zacchaeus climbs a tree, and he didn't get up in the tree and say, hey, up here. No, Jesus instinctively knew, and he looks up, he goes, hey, Bubba. Hey, Zacchaeus. He's like, oh, he knows me. He knows me. Jesus looked up and he saw Zacchaeus, and Jesus called Zacchaeus by name. He looked up at him. Look at that guy. And he called him by name. Having positioned himself to see Jesus, Zacchaeus was in turn seen by Jesus. And he called him. And he says, come down, I got to come to your house. I got to be with you. I want to hang out with you. I must stay at your house today, he says. In other words, if you research that out, what it means is necessity brought on by the conduct of others toward us. In response of your approach to me, I'm going to respond to you. And Jesus says, I'm going to hang out with you. And everybody around says, you shouldn't do that. He has no value. That's what they said about him. He's a tax collector. I mean, we only notice him in April. Jesus, there are so many more valuable people here around that didn't climb a tree that are tall. There are so many more people around who have more value than this guy. Don't waste your time. But how many of you know it's one thing to place value on someone, it's another thing to find value in someone. And as a church, Big C and locally, I want us to get beyond the place of determining what somebody's worth based on what they do or do not do. If your value is tied to your action, you've missed why Jesus came. Our value is tied to how He sees us and what He says about us. In other words, catch this. Everybody else, you know how they addressed or described Zacchaeus? He's a sinner. How did Jesus describe him? No, he's a son. Wait a minute. The crowd said, he's a sinner. If Jesus only knew, if Jesus was smart enough to recognize, people for years have been trying to tell Jesus what he's missing. Who else besides me has ever told him that? Jesus, you messed this one up. Let me help you. Let me clarify, because you apparently weren't paying attention. Have you seen this person? And they were telling him why Zacchaeus wasn't the right candidate, and, don't hang out with this guy, and he's a sinner, he's a mess, he has no value. Jesus, if you go to his house, he's going to expect you to pay taxes. Jesus, if you go to his house, be careful what you eat, he'll be charging you. Jesus, this guy's going to put stipulations. This guy's got no value. He doesn't help us. Jesus, don't go to his house. We can't even get him to serve as an usher. Jesus, don't go to his house. He didn't sign up for the volunteer fair. Jesus, don't go to his house. He didn't, and we value or evaluate. You know what that is? That's disgusting. I want you to understand something. And I know I don't always get this one right. But when I look at people, I don't value them based on what they can offer or what they can do or what they give. I do my best to look at people and see the value that God has placed in them and then do my part to help them see that too. And why do I do that? Is it because I think I'm better? No, it's because that's what Jesus did. And if I'm going to walk like him, then I need to operate like him in how I see people. Listen, I want you to understand this. I want everybody in this church to serve in some capacity. Absolutely, I do. Why? Because I think there's value in serving. But if you don't, it doesn't change the fact that I love the snot out of you. Because it don't matter. Because my feelings toward you is not based on, we got some people that they'll do anything. And sometimes I don't love them more. They get on my nerves. I'm kidding. I wanted to see if you were paying attention. Easy, Patty. But I dare say Zacchaeus lived his whole life thinking, is anybody ever going to see me? And I dare say some of you sitting in this place this morning have lived much of your life thinking, will anybody ever see me? What do I have to do to get their attention? And the world tells you to do wrong things to get attention from people. But the Lord says, I see you. And let me call out of you what you have forgotten is inside of you. So he cares about you more than he cares about what you're dealing with. Again, it doesn't mean he doesn't care about what you're dealing with. But he didn't come to die just so that you could have it better on earth. He came to die so that we could be with him in eternity. So it's you he died for, not your needs. In communion, we talked about he came to give us peace and healing and freedom and forgiveness. Yes, the cross took care of the needs, but more than that, it was for you. It was for me. And he's willing to touch everybody. It don't matter. Don't matter if you look the part, smell the part, act the part. Don't matter. He'll touch you. It don't matter if others say, oh, leave that one alone. Jesus says, oh, that's exactly who I came for. Why? Because he finds value in you, not places value on you. The world wants to evaluate you. What are you worth? And keeping record, right? Let's keep a tally. Oh man, you're member of the year. But Jesus says, oh, wait a minute. This is my son in whom I'm well pleased. And everybody's like, what has he done to earn that? Nothing. Because servants seek to earn what sons know they've received. Yes, ma'am. I can take direction. Servants will seek to earn what sons know they have received. Even Zacchaeus in this story, he goes, Lord, I'll make it right. I'll make it right. He just didn't even care. He didn't listen to that part. He goes, no, he's the son of Abraham. I came to seek and save the lost. That's why I'm here. And we look beyond the moment. We look beyond what we can get from people. He was crushed so that we could be healed. That's what walking like Jesus looks like. Is we want the best from others, even if it doesn't, quote unquote, benefit us. Because he sees beyond all of that. Y'all can come back out here. It's my cue to be quiet. But if we're going to walk like Jesus, it means we look beyond the things that are obvious. Well, I can see what's wrong or what's right with that person. But look beyond the outward and look to the heart. I alluded to it a moment ago, but when God was moving the kingdom away from Saul, he told Samuel, he goes, go to Jesse's house and anoint his son. So Jesse says, yeah, I got some sons for you. Got a whole flock of them. And Samuel says, all right, let's go. And then they have their parade of flesh, Got the sons walking the runway. And the first one comes out, and he's tall, and he kind of looks a little like Saul had looked. He's like, oh, yeah. Samuel's like, oh, yeah, definitely. God says, nope. He goes, okay, Jesse, got any more? Yep, got another one. Oh, yeah. God says, nope. And they all pass through, and he's looking around, and ain't nobody standing there, and God hadn't said yes yet. And he goes, Jesse, any more? Oh, yeah. There's one more. David. Where's David? He's out with the sheep, and, he's easy to forget. Samuel goes, I need to see him too. Jesse goes, I got 5 really good ones. I got the starting 5. Why do we need to substitute? He goes, we ain't doing nothing until I see the other one. Good grief. David! Yes, Dad. And God says, here he is. Samuel's like, you've got to be kidding me. Him? Nobody would pick him. And God says, but I look at the heart. I look at what's on the inside. And what happened that day, the moment he was anointed, the Bible said God put a new spirit in him. Something inside of him that was already there came alive. He was devalued by his dad and by his brothers and by everybody around him. But when God called it out, so I want you to know today, no matter how others label you, don't matter how others see you, don't matter if others say you're this or that or what you're worth or what you're not worth, don't matter. Because he says, I found you, and I see you, and you have value to me. Not because of your activity, but because I know who you are, because I made you. So Lord Jesus, I thank you today. I thank you today that we can walk like you. Because as you walk this earth, as you were, so are we. And I thank you today that you see beyond what we may be facing, and you see us. You see beyond what might be going on, and you see us. And I thank you today when others try to avoid, you're willing to touch because you see us. When others try to evaluate us, you see beyond that because you see value in us, and you're willing to touch us and meet with us. And so, Lord, as you were, let us be. And there's twofold application to this today, Lord. Help us to realize that you see us as an individual. And help us to receive you before we receive from you. And help us to allow you to prepare us to receive what you have for us. And in addition, Lord, help us to be that with others around us as well.